Hi, I'm Keir Bowden, and today I'm going to talk about building a mobile web application with jQuery Mobile and HTML5. So first, a little bit about me. I'm CTO of BrightGen, a Platinum Cloud Alliance Salesforce partner in the United Kingdom, and I've been working with the Force.com platform for around 4.5 years, and with jQuery Mobile for coming up for 2 years now, since it was in alpha. And finally, I'm a Force.com MVP, which means I do a lot of these sort of presentations to the developer community. And if you are part of the developer community, you may know me better as Bob Buzzard. So first up, let's clarify what is meant by a mobile web application. These are based on web pages that are styled appropriately for a mobile device and accessed via the built-in web browser. So for an iPhone, it would use the built-in Safari browser. They only have access to basic device features such as geolocation and sometimes the camera. What differentiates a mobile web application from a mobile website is that the application is transactional, which means that you aren't just viewing static pages, but you're creating, editing, deleting data. So next, a little bit about jQuery Mobile. So this is a mobile user interface framework. It doesn't manage your data, it just looks after the presentation side of things. It's touch optimized, which means that it's designed primarily for touchscreen interaction. It supports a wide range of devices, as well as phones and tablets. It works on desktop and e-reader platforms. And last but by no means least, it's built on the solid foundation of jQuery. So if you're familiar with that, the learning curve is certainly reduced. So jQuery Mobile uses progressive enhancement to provide the best user experience possible for a given device. And this takes a layered approach to rendering the page. The first layer is the regular HTML. This won't look particularly great, but it will be functional. So older devices and browsers will still be able to use the application, but it won't be as slick as it would be on a modern smartphone. The second layer is CSS, which enhances the view. And the third layer is JavaScript, which is applied for animations, transitions, AJAX requests, etc. So jQuery Mobile determines the enhancements that it needs to apply based on HTML5 custom data attributes. So defining a data role of header enhances the div to make it look like an application header, and applying a data icon of gear adds the gears image to the options button. So these aren't standard HTML attributes. They're a way to store additional data on the element which has meaning to the application. So in this case, jQuery Mobile knows that if it encounters the data icon attribute, it needs to add the specified icon to the element. And if jQuery Mobile was removed from the application, this attribute would be ignored. If you've been using JavaScript frameworks for a while, this is the sort of information that we used to store on the class or rel attributes back in the bad old days. So each Visualforce page using jQuery Mobile can contain a single logical web page or multiple logical web pages. So for applications which will run on a mobile phone, I tend to use the multiple page variant, as that means the entire set of pages is downloaded in one request rather than having to make a round trip to the server each time the user clicks on anything. And each web page is defined as a div with a data role attribute of page. So in this little example snippet of a Visualforce page here, I have 2 page divs, which equates to 2 logical web pages. So when the application is opened, the web page contained in the first div is displayed. But if a user then clicks on the link, the web page contained in the second div gets displayed. So if jQuery Mobile handles the display side of things, where does the business logic exist? So it can exist in the Visualforce controller, but this doesn't really play very nicely with the jQuery Mobile page navigation, especially where forms are concerned, and particularly where you've got multiple forms across your pages. So the best place for your business logic is in client-side JavaScript in conjunction with the Salesforce REST API or JavaScript remoting to interact with the server. One advantage to this is that if you decide to turn your web application into a hybrid application using PhoneGap or Cordova, you'd have to move your logic into JavaScript anyway. So this way you'll have done some of that work up front. So for the purposes of this session, I'm going to use JavaScript remoting. This does restrict me to Visualforce pages, which means that I couldn't easily re-platform this app onto something like Heroku. But the upside is that it doesn't consume any API calls. So for those who haven't used JavaScript remoting before, this requires code to be written for both the client and the server. Each method in the controller that supports remoting must have the remote action annotation. And this example here simply retrieves all tasks that have the group identified by the group ID parameter as their parent. So on the client side, there's JavaScript code to invoke the remote method, and as it's an asynchronous request, a callback method must be specified, and it's this callback method that will receive and process the results of the request, manipulating the DOM to display the retrieved records, for example. So onto my sample application. This is a to-do list application, as is very much the trend these days whenever you're doing anything around JavaScript frameworks. And as well as viewing tasks that need to be done, tasks can also be collected into named groups. They can be created or completed via the application, and groups can also be created. So the technology used is force.com for the database, the remoting controller, and the hosting of the pages, the CSS, and the JavaScript resources. I'm using jQuery Mobile 1.3.1 for the presentation, and I'm using Visual Force JavaScript remoting for the business logic. So enough static slides, let's have a look at this application. So this is the main page of the app. It contains a list of task groups and displays the count of open tasks in the group. A nice feature of jQuery Mobile, which they introduced in version 1.3, are these Facebook-style panels that can be opened on the click of a button to reveal additional information. So in this case, I've used it to display some instructions about how to use the application. Something else of note on this page is that the list of groups is searchable. So as I type in some characters, the list then changes to only display those which match the details. And in order to enable this, I had to specify 2 attributes on the list container in the page, and jQuery Mobile did everything else for me. So clicking through a task group retrieves and displays the open and closed tasks for that particular group. So each task shows the date that it was due for completion. As we can see here, that's for those that are open and also for those that are completed. So if I then click through on one of these, this will show me full details of the task and a button to mark the task as complete. So as I'm recording this presentation, I'm going to mark this one as complete. So this updates the record in the database to indicate that it has been completed, and then I'm taken back to the list of tasks for this group. And as you can see, the record presentation has moved from the open list into the completed list. If I then click through onto a completed task, again, that shows me full details of the task, including its completed date, but I've got no button because there's no further actions that I can carry out on this particular task. So if I want to add a new task, I can simply click on the Add New list entry and fill out some details about it. And then that takes me back to the list of tasks of the group, and you can see that the new task appears in the open list of Give Demo here, and I've given that completion date of today. So finally, I can also create a task group by going back to the main page and clicking on the Add New button. So once again, I fill out the form. I'm just going to give this a very straightforward name. Click Save on that, and that then takes me back to the main list of groups, and I can see here that there is an additional task group here of test. Now I should point out here that in all cases where there's interaction with the server, the records that are created and updated are sent back to the database and then received afresh by the applications. There's no local storage of data. As the records are retrieved, they're just simply used to generate some markup, and then that information is discarded. So that's the application. So let's have a look at some code. So here's my jQuery mobile page, my Visual Force page, and as you can see, there's multiple page divs inside this single Visual Force page. Now, I usually put in a comment and some white space between each of the divs, each of the page divs. Otherwise, it can get quite difficult to see the wood for the trees. So if we locate the main page, and I can show you the custom attributes that added in the list filtering capability, which is these two attributes here, and that's the sum total of changes that I had to make. Everything else was done by jQuery Mobile for me. So notice also, this is my list of groups. Notice also that this is empty. So the JavaScript business logic retrieves the groups and populates the list when the application is first opened. And every time the user navigates to this page, that list is refreshed. And there's also a button down here that allows the user to refresh on demand. And this here section is the panel div that I showed, which was the about panel, which reveals that information. So all I've had to do to get this is declare it as a sibling of the page div and give it the data role of panel. And I can then make it the target of an anchor tag, which I've done here. Our about anchor tag. And the rest is taken care of for me. So here's the JavaScript business logic. I've put this into a Visualforce component for ease of editing. In a production application, this would obviously be minified and stored as a static resource, but in order to actually be able to display and easily change what's going on in the JavaScript, I've done it as a component. So there's the usual setup of some event handlers and the like. And then we get into the meat of the JavaScript remoting. And you can see there's the pattern here that we have a JavaScript method that executes a remote action in the controller, and then a JavaScript method beneath it that handles the response callback. So if we navigate down to the show groups, one of the things you may notice is that the callback handlers are directly injecting HTML into the DOM. So a cleaner solution to this would be to use a model view something framework like Knockout or Angular. However, this isn't as straightforward as it might seem at first glance. And the reason for this is that because of jQuery Mobile's progressive enhancement, which enhances the regular HTML to apply the mobile styling. Now this happens automatically when a page is first rendered. But if you update the HTML, you have to tell the framework to enhance the affected elements. So as you can see from this line of code here, what's happened here is that I've updated the list of the HTML for the list of elements, and I've got and then telling the list view widget to refresh itself and carry out the progressive enhancement. Now at this line of code, the list would just contain regular HTML links, which wouldn't look particularly great. So if you're using a model view whatever framework, you need a way to ensure that this refresh takes place, which generally means that you're either knowing far too much about where your data is going to live on the page, and you have that coded into effectively your JavaScript controller, or you end up extending a number of things that are available through that model view whatever framework. So it's not quite as straightforward as it might seem at first glance. So if you'd like to try this application out yourself, you can scan this code or open this short URL. So this provides access to the application via an unauthenticated force.com site, and you'll be accessing the application as the same user. So expect things to change underneath you. So that's the end of this particular session. So thanks very much for your time. If you have any feedback or questions, you can reach out to me on any of these channels. And I do plan on making this application available as an unmanaged package, so watch out for updates on that on Twitter or at my blog. Thanks very much for tuning in. See you next time.